All right, I want to call to order the budget workshop for FYI 2021 Mid-Hill Town Budget. I thank all the commissioners for being here this evening, and I'd like to turn it over to Town Manager Welch to lead us in the budget workshop this evening.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. I'm going to give you just a second here while we get that's the whole presentation. You guys should be able to see here. We got the PowerPoint that's up on the screen.
Is that going to be on these screens?
It should be on. Is it not in front of you? You don't have it there? Does anybody else have it? We have technical issues.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, guys. Bear with me for a moment.
There.
As long as the red goes off, the green ought to come on.
We good now? Everybody have it running? Okay, thanks. So, see the same thing.
That button on the side.
Here.
You good, Mayor?
Coming up, yes, sir.
Thank you, folks. So late last week, you each picked up a binder in the offices. That's the line item budget, if you will. That's the spending plan that illustrates all the revenues and the expenditures for or my recommended revenues and expenditures for the upcoming fiscal year for all departments. So also accompanying that, there was two sheets that highlights the manager's proposed budget. It kind of illustrates just the major changes. So much of it's fixed with insurances, utilities, and the such. There's no point in beating that point to death. So what I'm going to do tonight is I will go over just a brief highlight of all the departments. I've got the same information in front of me that you guys have, so if you have any questions about any specific line items, just stop me and let me know at any time. We have no reason to wait till the end. So our first slide here, you'll see the FY21 recommended budget across all funds. Left column is the adopted budget for the current fiscal year, and then the right column is the manager's recommended budget for next fiscal year. So for FY21, the manager is recommending in the general fund $19,703,397, PAL bill $760,000, stormwater $562,757, infrastructure fund $50, tourism fund $225,150, and PD drug forfeiture in the amount of $50. Just real quickly, brief description of that infrastructure and PD drug forfeiture fund. The infrastructure fund was initially established, probably about a decade ago, when a couple of homes were going for a rezoning on Willgrove Mid-Hill Road as part of the downtown. And as part of that rezoning request, they would be required to put in certain pieces of infrastructure, specifically some road improvements, curb and gutter, and sidewalk. Obviously, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense if you had just a single lot, since they're all kind of residentially divided up, to have a single lot put in sidewalk. So what we established was this infrastructure fund where they paid an amount into that fund equal to what they would spend for their portion of it, which we could then use and do one whole project at a time, which is kind of what we did when we built the sidewalk out on Willgrove Mid-Hill Road. So if nothing else, the $50, it's just a placeholder. We actually haven't spent or received or spent anything out of there in several years. Almost the same thing with the PD drug forfeiture. Our auditors wanted us, that's the drug seizure money that we get whenever we're involved in certain cases, that there's a forfeiture or seizure of cash. The auditors wanted that separate. I believe the federal government likes to see it separately as well, so they can account for exactly what's going in and what's going out and how it's spent. Again, that $50, most likely there will be a budget amendment that we'll come back to you guys with at the end of the year to kind of really shores up exactly what was brought in and what was expended, so there's no way we can know that in advance. So the $50 is just a placeholder.
Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
I know that nobody knows anything right now about what's going on, but with the COVID-19 and all this lockdown stuff, or some of these numbers probably are going to be affected in their actuals.
Yes, I have taken that into consideration based on the information that I've gotten from Mecklenburg County. Those folks have financial analysts that have been hawking this. I mean, they do it year in and year out anyway. So my revenues do take that into consideration.
Okay.
The information we've got from the North Carolina League of Municipalities, just anecdotally, been doing it for 14 years, information we gathered from Mecklenburg County, so forth and so on. So this takes that into consideration.
Okay.
Am I going to tell you it's 100% right? I mean, we won't know, but it does take that into consideration based on the information we know now.
Okay.
So our general fund highlights, you can see here FY20 and then FY21 with a proposed proposed of $19,703,397. That's obviously a market increase over FY '20. I can tell you now, it'll be a few slides from now, that the biggest driver of that's that $3 million sidewalk grant that we got. That's obviously, if you take that $3 million away, it's not much more of an increase. But kind of the highlights across the general fund, that includes an additional staff person in the police department and the fire department, 4% market rate adjustment, which is actually going to be effective, to your point of monitoring revenues. We're actually going to make that effective mid-year. So of the 26 pay cycles, that 14th pay cycle sometime in January will activate that market rate adjustment. And that affects everyone except for the town manager and the board of commissioners. It affects all other employees in the pay scale. And then a 2.5% merit pool that's based upon your individual performance evaluations that employees receive annually.
Let me ask a question.
Sir.
When's the last time that they were given raises?
We've sneaked them in annually. I'll kind of tell you what I do is, or what I try to do. Some municipalities will do these salary studies and pay consultants $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year to come in, do these market rate analysis, and then try to apply that over time. I do them in-house, quite frankly. I look at the League of Municipalities. They do a salary survey that gets a really good turnout. Several hundred municipalities respond to that. They break it down by population classification. So, I try to keep us, I try to keep us in the middle. You don't want to be the lowest, so obviously you can, attract and retain good employees, and there's no reason to be the highest. I do internal studies to kind of keep us in the middle.
So it's performance-based, not just across the board?
The 4%, the market adjustment, it affects the pay scale. So every employee that's on the pay scale, which is every employee except for the town manager and you guys, their number just changes. So if you're grade 8, step 12, that grade 8, step 12 in January of next year will be 4% higher. And then the 2.5%, the merit raise, that's the one that's based on your performance evaluation.
And I've been on, I've been on calls with the other mayors, and at this point in time, that's probably going to be on the high end of the scale on what we're looking at in the surrounding towns.
Okay.
So we're trying to take care of our people.
Here in this next slide, governing body and administration has an FY21 proposed budget of $1,399,484. The primary driver of that increase over last year's was I have $150,000 included for the land use plan update that I say we're underway now. I expect in June, hopefully, we'll have a scope of work that we want to put to you guys and have you bless the request for qualifications before we go out and find a consultant. But this is the funding for that exercise.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Seems to me 10 years ago we were over 200,000.
We were. A couple of factors in that. One, if you'll recall, we had the same consultant that actually did 2 studies because we did the small area plan around Lawyers Road.
That's right.
And then town-wide. Also, and this is part of the reason why I want you guys to bless the scope of work at the next meeting before we go out for qualifications. After we started looking at this, there's a lot of areas that there's no point in doing a 10-year plan for, and I'm going to give you a specific reason why. Much of the ETJ, particularly north of Fairview Road, has no access to sewer, and all the money in the world is not going to bring sewer there in the next 10, 15 years because there's so much that has to happen downstream, if you will, to treat that sewer. So there's no point paying a consultant, whatever that portion is going to be, to go programming areas out there unless you guys decide you want to start allowing package plants again in town, which I'm not sure anybody wants to do. So I think that we're going to have a more narrow focus, knowing what we know about the current environment. This is not going to change and couldn't.
Makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Next, we have fire. Recommended budget this year of $3,751,492, about $300,000 over last year, or the current year, I should say. Primary highlights here is an addition of an administrative captain's position. Currently, that person is in-house. It's Mike Hastings that was on the kind of EMS side, and we're going to roll him over to the fire side. Reassignment of debt associated with the station renovation. You guys may recall that we have an agreement with the fire department that we will pay them $100,000 a year to go towards the debt payment of the station renovation. But with the changeover that we anticipate happening July 1, at the last board meeting, you guys approved that debt where we paid it off and just refinanced it in our name because we can't just assume the debt. It has to be reassigned. And then obviously the purchase of fire equipment and other operational costs associated with that changeover. Next is Public Works. Here's where your sidewalk money is. $3.5 million increase over last year for a recommended budget of $4,609,636. Almost exclusively the sidewalk. $3 million of it is the sidewalk itself. for sidewalk work. And then there's debt service that we have to put in there since we're going to borrow that money. We have to show the full expenditure of the $3 million, but there's a $600,000 debt service in there as well. That's that full increase that you see over last year's. Yes, sir.
Brian, is there a particular area that we're gonna put $3 million more sidewalk?
Yes, that's what you guys blessed when you guys blessed the sidewalk grant application. It's and don't quote me on this, but it goes up Will Grove, Mint Hill Road. I think is it to Wilson Grove, I believe.
Yes.
And then all the way down Lawyers to the same spot. So you basically have a circuitous route where you can walk around. So yeah, the plans, we still have to design it, this, that, and the other. But I mean, that was part of the application. They wanted to know where the sidewalk was going to go.
So you're gonna take it from the park at Will Grove and go toward Wilson Road?
Yes, sir.
Feel like we're going to still be able to keep that grant with the COVID virus?
You don't know for sure. I know last week the mayor and I were on the CARPO, I guess Zoom meeting. I phoned in just to listen.
Yeah, I was in on it.
And DOT, they gave that presentation. This is technically federal money. CARPO is just a pass-through, and they routed off 3 or 4 different federal pools of money that are supposedly going to be untouched by this. So who can predict the future? I don't know, but this is not directly in jeopardy right now that we know of.
Okay.
One of the pieces of equipment that the Public Works Department requested was an excavator. So there's $110,000 in here for the purchase of an excavator that we would bid out. That's primarily going to go towards use at the park so that these guys can keep up with the walking trail at the Veterans Park. And lots of stormwater projects too, actually. Solid waste recommended budget of $2,361,440. That's just a slight increase over last year, or the current year, I should say. Monthly cost of $1,720 per home per month is staying the same. The increase that you see there is just new construction, new houses, and then a small increase in the per ton tipping fee that we pay through Mecklenburg County. The police department, a recommended budget of $5,681,567. That's about a $600,000 increase, a little over $600,000 increase over current. That includes one additional administrative captain, the acquisition of 6 vehicles, and various grant funding. But the most important one is our Governor's Highway Safety Program grant match, and that grant program would be for 4 additional personnel and equipment, including vehicles. It's graded the way it goes down. They pay for like 85% of equipment the first year and 75% of salaries. I might get these percentages wrong, but then it weans off so that after 3 years, they're your full salary responsibility. Parks is roughly the same, just a little bit down on capital. Recommended budget of in FY21 of $239,608. Non-departmental and debt service, that's essentially fixed. We don't have much choice there, but it is budgeted separately as a department, I should say. FY21, our debt payments will be $702,670. Non-departmental, that's your property and liability, insurance, workers' comp, legal charges, various contractual deals, and obviously most of the donations that we make. So the recommended budget for that for next year is $957,500. Again, you can see there that the increase over last year's $871,000 is due primarily to the property and liability and workers' comp associated with the changeover to the fire department. We are now responsible for those charges, and then an increase in and some new donations for various civic groups around town, the Chamber, the Athletic Association, Servants Heart, so forth and so on.
Questions on that? I've got a comment I'd like to make it. Go ahead. At this point in time, at the retreat, we had some concerns and some conversations about the Athletic Association. You were all present during that. Manager Welch and I met, I believe it was the week before last, with the Athletic Association. We had some concerns about their financial stability as well as some other things, but we talked to them at that point in time about their major debt and their major problem being the land that they own out on Brief Road. So we did have a conversation with their board as far as that is concerned. We looked at the possibilities about how the town could help that out, whether we could take over the land and do some work out there for them and help in that direction, instead of continually increasing and trying to keep them afloat with this donation. So with you guys' blessing, I'd like for us to give town staff the permission to move forward. First of all, I don't believe we've heard anything back from them officials. Is that right, Manager? Okay.
Not officially.
Okay. with your blessing, I'd like for town staff to move forward with this, look at what it would take for us to take that land, be able to make the improvements on the land, lease it back to the Athletic Association, a very minimal charge per year, work out that agreement to make sure that that association stays stable and continues to be of value to the community.
So they, if I understand correctly, then the town would take over the debt and own the dirt, and they would become a tenant. Is that what I'm hearing?
That was our suggestion to them based on their conversation we had. It was a very short conversation. We didn't get a budget from them at that point in time. We talked about leasing it back to them at $1 a year or something like that. Our main concern is there that I'm getting a lot of complaints, a lot of emails about how the association, the product they're delivering as far as the fields and everything else is going downhill, and the costs continue to increase. And we just thought we could step in there and help the town out, help the kids in the community out in that form.
Mayor, I like that idea because right across the road, we own that property already. Once that gets developed, we could take care of both sides of the road at the same time.
Right.
I've been thinking if they don't approve of this plan, I know a lot of the Historical Society and different avenues that we give money, we have a liaison from a town on that. I think we ought to have someone from our town on that board also, if we're giving them that much money just to...
Yeah, and they've had a tough year with everything they've gone through. Their spring season's now been canceled. They weren't able to give refunds because the money they bring in goes towards paying land fees and power and all those kind of things. So the public's not real happy right now that they didn't get a refund. They don't understand all that totally. And we even asked them at the meeting, were they going to be able to survive if they did not have a spring and a fall season this year, and that was questionable at that point in time. So
right now, the ball's in their court. We're just waiting to hear from them.
right now, the ball's in their court, but if they come back to us and say they'd like some help some way, shape, or form, I'd like to have town staff to have taken the time so that we know whether that is a good option for us going forward or whether we need to look at another avenue. Anything else? Thank you. Town manager, back to you, sir.
Slide here, they set the load up. Okay, so all this comes with the manager's recommended tax rate for FY21 of 25.5 cents per $100 valuation. That's the same tax rate as we have currently, and no increase in the $10 vehicle fee. If there are no more questions about the general fund, we move to the POW bill. POW bill highlights recommended budget of $760,000. That's down $10,000 from last year, trying to take into consideration some anticipated loss in our POW bill allocation. I have in there $100,000 for sidewalk repair and construction. That's really going to depend on if this CARPO grant comes through. That's obviously going to be probably all of our new construction for at least a couple of years, just because that's how long it'll take to get that finished. If it doesn't come through, I wanted to leave a small placeholder so we would have, a little one-off project here or there, and certainly enough available for some construction. In the event, I'm recommending to reduce the paving work by $10,000. In the event the CARPO funding does come through, we would likely reallocate probably at least half of this towards the resurfacing next year to squeeze another street or two in. Stormwater funds, no real changes. Recommended budget of $562,757. Tourism fund highlights, FY21 have it down $20,000 over the current fiscal year for a recommended budget of $225,150. Again, the sole source of money that we receive from this is from the prepared food tax. Obviously, we all know that that's likely going to be lower next fiscal year, so that's trying to take that into consideration. And I have listed there the various donations that were given to the groups out of the tourism funds that you guys, I believe, have all seen before. And that's it, folks. Happy to answer any questions. And again, I didn't really go over the infrastructure fund and police drug forfeiture fund. It requires no further explanation than I offered previously.
Any other questions?
Brian,
Yes, sir.
just a couple. I was going down through the different donations, the non-departmental donations, because of the pandemic and because of the nature of what the two organizations I'm going to mention do for the town. I don't know how set in concrete these numbers are at this point in time, but as far as the chamber, we're giving them a little increase. I know there's going to be small businesses that the chamber helps out a lot. I can't go into all they do, but I'd like to see the chamber and Servant's Heart go up a little bit more than that, because Servant's Heart is going to be having to help these people out to get back on their feet. Even now, they're being helped out. Is there any way that, may I suggest that we move that up a little bit, or can we move it
Sure.
up?
Just to be clear, tonight's presentation, I call it the wink and nod meeting. I'm done if you tell me you're done. I'm done. Other than that, we'll have a public hearing at the June meeting, and then we'll adopt the budget, or you guys will adopt the budget afterwards. With that said, three of you tell me to assign it a value, and that's the value I'll assign it. So no, sir, it's not too late. I mean, it requires revision on my end, but that's my job. That's what you pay me to do. I will say, just to follow up on that, the chamber went from 20 to 25, if you don't have the prior year's numbers in front of you, and then Servant's Heart, 15,000 to 20,000.
Just so you know, some of the behind-the-scenes stuff that's been going on with the Servant's Heart, I'm working with the county now. The county was granted some
39.
COVID money in the amount of $39 million, that if they don't use it for county for COVID, for that kind of thing, that they have to send it back. So I've had some contacts with them now. We're looking at ways that we can send some of that to the towns, if possible. That's up to the county. That's dependent upon the county. But some of the things we've talked about being able to do are to help people who may be in a situation that need rent money, going to get run out of their house, that kind of thing. That's one of the ideas we've looked at. Second thing we've looked at is helping some of the small businesses that may be struggling with that money due to the COVID. And we've even talked about Servant's Heart being one of the centers that we could funnel those funds through. So my thought process
Is the rest is?
my thought process is the same as yours, except for, both of them, that's a pretty substantial percentage raise that we've already given them this year. And I'm a fan of both, okay? I'm a member of the chamber, and Servant's Heart, I know they're doing a fabulous job. But I'd like to, of course, wait and see what happens with that COVID money. So that if that came in, that would be quite a windfall for us.
Really,
It would
I
help
think
both
the
of them
increase is good.
tremendously.
It's an unprecedented time, as that word's been misused a million times.
Absolutely.
Reason I
But
ask.
that's some things I'm working on behind the scenes right now that I don't have enough information to share any more than that with you.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Well, if we find that those guys can be a conduit or have any specific needs, it's not unheard of. There's not a year goes by that we don't have some sort of a mid-year budget amendment.
Right.
So we could certainly address if something arises.
Thank you very
And
much.
happy to do so.
Any other questions or comments?
Couple of questions. I support fully the deal with the Athletic Association if that goes through. I did have a question. I think you answered it, but I didn't note it. Maybe not this meeting. Additional staff persons needed, because if we take on the responsibility of cutting the grass and maintaining the grounds and bringing it up to speed, and you don't know this, but what do you think it would take, either hours or staff people?
Just one additional Public Works. Steve and Chris and I have obviously already had this conversation.
Okay.
Just one staff person. You would have, bless their hearts, all those guys, the little guys in the woods, what Dwayne used to call them, they touch everything.
Right.
So yeah, you would see them out there, as a team or parts of them. But in terms of the workload and what it would take to address that, one additional staff person.
Okay, all right.
I've got a quick question or comment on that. But by us doing this, I'm understanding that they won't have to worry about as much as paying back a note and a payment, to the point that where the dollars that they're getting from the players could actually be reduced and not be as expensive on the public for signing their children up.
Yes, sir. What I have contemplated, and this is based upon, I actually don't have a budget for them this year. I have a budget for last year. But in round numbers, their budget last year was $220,000. If this plan were to go through, their expenses would be reduced by about $160,000. Just to put that in perspective, they budgeted last year for fees, what I pay for my kids to play ball out there, almost $93,000. So right there, $33,000 to the good. It would just, it's more light bills we'd have to pay, more fertilizer we'd buy, instead of buying one pallet, we'd buy 2 pallets, kind of thing. But one of the conditions that I kind of just didn't have these cursory conversations with these guys was that, I would recommend to you folks that as part of our lease agreement, which is what we'd have with them, you'd have a sales agreement to purchase the property, and then, ultimately a lease agreement right back to them, would be that the fees were reduced, because that's a complaint that I've heard ongoing. I know several families that have pulled their families out and, gone to other associations due to the cost. So that's one of the things that I wanted to drive home.
With that being said, part of the fee that or part of the donation that we make to them every year, that started years ago as a way of covering scholarship situations for people in the community that could not afford to pay that. We've got away from that, I think, a little bit because the fees have got so high that there's a lot of people that would be in that scholarship situation. And hopefully we'll get that number down, that we can get a lot more in the community back involved with the program.
I like the proposal.
Yeah, other than the town, taking on additional costs, which, that's what we do. We provide services and facilities. That's, by definition, that's what a town does. But, other than the additional costs for us, and I'll get you guys a little more concrete numbers, including the additional personnel, I don't see how it's a bad situation for anybody.
I'd like to make a comment. I really thank you for your time and work you've put into this budget. I know most all the Levine centers and the historicals and all would love to have more money, but it is what it is, and I appreciate what you've done.
Thank you.
Good job.
Any other comments? With that, I'm going to adjourn our budget workshop.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.